Hey, welcome to the Extra Podcast. My name is Daniel. I'm joined around the table with Jeff Bucknam.
Yes, I am here.
And Andy Steiger.
Present.
Good to see you, Andy. And
good to be seen, Daniel.
It is good. Man, and you got a bright shirt on today?
Feeling good.
Feeling good.
It's kind of an October-y shirt.
It is. It's like looks like a tree changing colors shirt. It's got some black and a little bit of red on it.
Is that red or is that orange?
I don't know. Oh. Under these lights, it's like a reddish orange. Kind of like an autumn tree.
Yeah, makes me feel good.
Kind of like an autumn tree, the autumn leaves. We had a vortex this morning. Power went out at my place.
Man, there was some serious wind kicking up this morning. I was worried about my tree fort in the back. It's in those moments that I question my craftsmanship.
Andy, you built your own tree fort. Well, I mean, I say your own. It's for the children.
Supposedly for the children. Yeah, I did, and it's still standing. It's made it through a number of windstorms now.
You're a carpentry guy.
I like to build. I like
you're
to
a true
tinker.
Jesus follower.
It's true. The whole carpenter thing. No, I like to tinker, man. I don't know about you. Tell me, Jeff.
No, you don't know about me. No,
I know you don't like to tinker.
Don't. No.
But I find that each pastor needs to have an outlet. You gotta somehow go build or destroy something, I guess. What do you do?
I invest my kid in my kids' sports far too much. Yeah, it's not much of an outlet because they lose.
Do you get to do some screaming though? Like you can let the energy.
I find it difficult actually. Yeah, because never really pays off.
It is hard to see your kid lose, though.
You'll get used to it, Andy.
Yeah,
or maybe you won't. I always wonder about those who have kids who win all the time. I think, wow, that must be what would that be like? It's not that my kids aren't good at the sports; they're great at it. It's just they're Bucknams, which requires a certain amount of losing.
It has a Seattle name tag associated to it.
Oh yeah,
yeah. There you go. Well, gentlemen, we have switched positions that we usually sit on. Usually Jeff's to my right, but now Jeff's across the table. And this is intentional, Andy, because Jeff, we want to do some live podcast discipline with you right now. It's not church discipline, but this is podcast discipline in the sense that on Sunday,
it's a bit during of an
your sermon, it's an intervention. And during your sermon, you told the entire congregation, I don't know how many times you told it, that you'd be preaching next week. And that was a two-faced lie, Jeff. And we're calling you to some podcast repentance. What say you?
I acknowledge the untruth. But the untruth is that I'm preaching next week at Northview. I said in the end of my sermon that I was really excited because come back next week because I will be preaching on Romans 7:13-25, which is one of the most controversial passages in the New Testament in terms of interpretation and understanding. It's actually one of the more misquoted and misunderstood passages in all the Bible.
I haven't seen you that excited, by the way,
and I love
since
it.
the time you found that candy bar.
Yeah, I love that passage. I wrote my master's degree on it. I was really thrilled about it. Okay, I wrote a master's thesis on it. So, yeah, and I just kind of said what I did, and I genuinely thought that this following week I was preaching at the Abbotsford campus of Northview on that text. I happened to be preaching on that text the following week. Not this coming weekend, but the weekend after at the Abbotsford campus. And so the timing of it was an untruth.
So you'd say
unintentional fabrication. I'm actually scheduled to preach at the Tri-City Church Plant this weekend on Philippians chapter 2. And at the Abbotsford campus, we have the International Justice Mission weekend. Ezra will be preaching on that text, though, Romans 7:13-25, up at the Mission campus this weekend. But I'm going to have to do some study with him first so that he gets it right. Is that understood? That's understood, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, yeah, I agree with you, and your confrontation of me is spot on. Absolutely.
And was this helpful to you, Jeff?
Yeah, it was very helpful. It's funny that I didn't realize that I had made this error until Sunday evening when I was. Sometimes you go home and whatever, and you're sitting there, and my stomach sank immediately. I was like, oh no! Now how am I going to explain that timing thing, and some guy's going to show up. I'm here for the controversy, and then it's going to be International Justice Mission. They're like, what?
That's just good branding right there, Jeff.
It's
like you set up IJM for a big week.
Well, yeah. If people wanted to come back and hear me talk about it,
Well, that's brilliant, though.
But listen, so here's the corrected version. Not this weekend, but the following weekend. I'm very excited about talking about Romans 7:13-25.
And you will be, and we look forward to it. And Andy, in your hand, I mean, you are back. You are a traveling man these days.
Back from Scotland.
I mean, have you spent any time in Canada? Have you spent any time at young adults doing your job?
I have, actually. I've been there for everyone. P.S. But by the way, Daniel's been in my stead preaching it and doing a great job. I was working on my PhD out there at Aberdeen. And while I was out there, I went to the store.
Did you have some haggis?
Which, by the way, they pronounce haggis.
Haggis. Did you eat the haggis?
I actually had a waitress laugh out loud this year.
Because you said haggis.
Because I ordered haggis, yeah. So while I was gone, though, I bought something for you, Jeff, something quite special. There
is it haggis?
In Scotland. I wish I could bring you back some
Is
haggis.
it a kilt?
That I would not bring you.
It's not a skirt, it's a kilt.
The drink of Scotland is Iron Brew. And I brought you some Iron Brew that I brought actually my unicorn mug so that you could drink Iron Brew out of it.
But this is your unicorn mug, but I get to drink the Iron Brew it's Iron Brew, IRNBRU. Iron Brew.
That's exactly how they say it, by the way, when you order it.
Scotland.
Wait, you can actually order that at dinner?
Yeah, at every restaurant. That is the go-to.
This is
not on tap.
I'll have the brew, please.
I'm reading the ingredients, and it says there's no fat, no saturates, and like all sugar. It's 30% sugar. That's what this is.
That's what the Scots live on.
30% sugar, and nothing else. That's amazing.
Why don't you give that a go and tell us what you think? What do you think of Iron Brew?
Do you want me to drink it out of the?
Or you could you could drink it out of.
I'm going straight
bottle.
out of the bottle.
That makes sense.
That's the way the Irish do it. Wait a minute. Is that Scottish, Irish? Doesn't really matter. They're all the same.
Probably a mix of both, actually.
Wow, that smells like bubble gum.
All right, Jeff,
it smells like a bubblegum soda, is what I'm saying.
Here he goes. He's sipping. Heads back. It's like a Coke commercial.
It's bubblegum soda.
That's what I say.
It's actually not bad.
But isn't it a little bit weird when you envision bagpipes and kilts and bubblegum soda with haggis? It just doesn't seem to go together.
Oh, there's a lot of sugar in that. Wow. That is a remarkable... yeah. Woo! Come on now. That's good stuff.
Would you order that?
That right there is some Iron Brew.
When I ordered that the first time, I thought this is going to be the thickest beer I've ever seen.
It's not. It's
bubblegum soda.
It's got an orangey look to it. It's better than most of the sodas around here, especially the sugary ones. I like it a lot.
Jeff, do you think we could? I think we could import some of that in between services, and as you're sitting there after you've just preached, you could have that and be drinking that.
Woo!
Jeff
really
is ready
sweet.
to take flight.
No, it's really sweet. You want to try some?
Oh yeah, I love
Here,
it.
hold on. We'll put it in this so you don't have to. We'll put it. Okay, here you go.
All right, we're gonna
Daniel's gonna have
the
a little
listeners
bit.
love this segment.
The listeners love this.
He's taking a drink out of the.
It's all fizz.
He's taking a drink out of the unicorn cup. Apparently,
one of the manliest things you can do, Jeff.
see what it tastes? It tastes like.
I can't even get it. It's all fizz.
Drink an Iron Brew out of a unicorn mug that tastes like bubblegum.
Oh, that's so good.
Living the dream.
That is so good. This is good radio. This is live tasting. Andy, thanks for that.
You're welcome, guys.
Guys, the next thing I want to talk about is this. I think that we need to do a better job at branding this podcast. In the sense that
it's all about the branding.
It's all about the branding. Greg Harris yesterday was he sent me a photo. He said last night, as of 10 p.m. on religion and spirituality podcasts in North America, we were ranked 126. Now, or maybe that's Canada. Now we're not even on the list. We've dropped in a matter of hours. You told me when I came on this podcast that this was a massive.
When you came on this podcast, I said this is a top 125 podcast.
Yeah.
And now, now it's not, Daniel.
Yeah, I guess we're 126 and now no longer 125. So, gentlemen, what do we do? How do we get this back up? like, what is Northview culture?
I think the Iron
How do
Brew.
we-
I think the Iron Brew segment is going to put us over the top.
Do you think so?
I do.
I think.
What
it
is
might.
Northview culture?
Yeah, tell us Northview culture. So if you're gonna tell people they come for the first time
Yeah.
to church, what is Northview culture?
Okay, so this actually is a very good question that you just asked me because we have gone through a process over the last couple of years where we, and by we I mean the elders and some in the leadership of the church, have tried to identify what are the kind of unique things that are a little bit different about Northview. And there are those kinds of things that they call, in the business world, brand promises, meaning like, what if you come to Northview, what kinds of things can you expect? And so stuff like that for us would be like we take a lot of time to try to do our programs with a level of excellence. We are very careful to make sure that, like, we cover some of the safety issues, like your children and all that kind of stuff. We think about lots of those sorts of things. We really committed to preaching the word in all of our areas of ministry, right? It's just part of our just ministry paradigm. That so those are the kind of like what makes Northview in that regard. But our culture is what you're asking about.
That's what I'm asking.
And our culture as a church is we have identified three pieces that are true of us. One is that we like to call it humility. One of you has a cell phone that's just buzzing all the time.
Is that what that's?
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta get away from here.
We like to talk about humility, which is our way of saying that our church has a cynical, sort of little sarcastic bit, which you can tell by even our podcast. Some people listen to us.
We don't take ourselves too seriously.
No,
We take this podcast seriously.
We
but
put
nothing
it
else.
in the positive sense that we value humility, which is this, which is us basically saying, look, nobody has a right to not laugh at themselves at some point or another. We all make errors and mistakes, and so even though we try to do things with excellence and whatever, we're not a television program that's like it has to have everything, all our ducks in a row all the time in order to present some perfect picture to everybody in the world, right? So that we value humility, we value kind of reduplicating ourselves, growing ourselves in others, meaning that we tend to focus on leadership development a lot.
Can I jump in there?
Yep.
It's one of the things I love about Northview, and my time being here is the thought that is put into developing leaders and seeing these leaders multiply throughout churches across not only our area but Canada, and seeing that actually been taking place over the last number of years is something I'm incredibly proud of to be a part of here at Northview.
Yeah, we count it as a win when we see a pastor from our church leave. I know that doesn't sound nice, you know what I mean? But if they're going off to be a part of another church where they're going to take hopefully some things that they learned here or grew here to believe, and they go into those other churches, we see that as a real positive thing, right? And so one of our elders actually is going to be Jason is his name. He's going to be a pastor at a church in Chilliwack. One of the pastors at a church in Chilliwack. And so we think this is awesome. What a cool way for us to have an influence, we hope, in the life of Jason and now hopefully the life of this other church through Jason ultimately. So we actually think that there could be a renewal in the church in Canada through this kind of thing. And so we have pastoral interns on our property here who are doing master's degree. Daniel's one of them. He's doing his master divinity degree while he's here. And we have an intern program. And anyway, all of our pastors are looking to train other people, lay leaders and others, and we're trying to constantly think about how we can do better leadership development. The last piece is we try to tell people that we want to double the master's money, which is a line that comes from the parable of the talents. And we mean by that look, the time is short. Jesus is returning. We want to be found faithful in using the gifts he's given us to multiply his kingdom through it. So if that means that we kind of walk with a forward tilt or you know what I mean? Like we're kind of assertive regarding how
we're not in a holding pattern.
We do ministry or things like that. We're pretty ruthless when it comes to our assessments of the ministries that we're currently running. We won't just hold on to doing something just because we've always done it. Anyway, so those are the things that kind of talk a little bit about our culture and the things that I usually tell people. If you don't agree with those sorts of things or if they don't kind of resonate with you, you might find that Northview is a struggle for you at points, right? And you just kind of need to understand them. They're not right or wrong. They're just kind of what our culture is.
Yeah. Andy, would you add anything else to that, particularly with young adults?
Well, yeah. One of the things that I also appreciate about what we do and an emphasis that we have is we understand that not everyone that we invest into is going to be a pastor.
No.
But we know that those that we're investing into are someday going to be leaders in the church in a variety of fashions. And so we, even the way we run our internship, that's our desire, is we want to see you be a fruitful part of growing the kingdom of God in whatever aspect that looks like.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, I consider it a blessing to be able to be, I guess, a part of that. And I'm right in the front.
You guess?
Lines of that.
Are you guessing? You guess that you're part of it?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes
I think it's kind of evident at this point, don't you know?
You're definitely
don't you think?
part of it, Daniel.
I think it is. Yeah.
Do you have a key?
I do have a key.
Okay, so there
I
it
have
is.
a fob, but I don't have there's one room I can't get into.
There's more than one room, Daniel, that
There's
you
a
can't get
couple
into.
rooms.
We have secret rooms around the church that are like no pastoral intern rooms, right?
Yes.
They've got sharp objects and stuff in them. We don't want you to hurt yourself.
Yes, Jeff. Sorry for asking, Jeff. Hey, I want to move on and talk about something else here. As we've been working through this idea we've been talking about a lot about the law, a lot about grace and the law, and how do we understand?
Why are we doing? Because we're in Romans.
Because we're in Romans, yeah.
Romans 6 and 7, yeah.
And so the whole chapter 6 has been free from the law. Now you're under grace.
Yeah.
And law land, grace land. Whatever.
Yes.
You've used that distinction back and forth.
Yeah.
So, what do we do about certain things? Because I've been thinking about this question myself as well. Is the law the 10 Commandments? Okay, I'm going to say, is that okay if I call it the law?
Well,
I'm talking about the 10.
Yeah, we just need to clarify what Romans 6 and 7 is referring to when it talks about the law. It's usually capitalized because it means the Mosaic law, the law that was handed down to Moses on Mount Sinai that is summarized in the 10 Commandments, yes.
Great.
But we're talking the whole thing.
Yeah, he means the law. Although there's a debate, just so you know, there's a debate on the book of Romans regarding what works of the law refer to. Okay?
Would that refer to the
this is the
laws?
difference between what's called the traditional Lutheran perspective on Romans and the new perspective. And the new perspective would argue that works of the law have to do with what we call Jewish boundary markers, as opposed to, so when Paul is using the language, you won't be saved by doing works of the law. No one will be justified by doing works of the law. What he's saying, according to that view, is no one will be saved by their Jewishness. And the boundary markers that mark Jewishness have to do with circumcision and food laws and things like that.
A distinction that some would make the distinction between moral laws and ritual laws.
Yeah, that's a little bit more reformed take on it. But yeah, like there's a big debate on Romans and stuff. I hold a what I call a modified Lutheran approach to it. I actually think that the reformers were pretty spot on in their understanding of Romans. As I've studied, I think that the new perspective adds a bit to it. It adds some understanding about Jew and Gentile relations, but I don't think that's the major note that Paul is trying to strike as he goes through the book. I actually think that justification by faith has to do with how one is found righteous before a holy God. Where, anyway, if you're listening to me right now and you're into that kind of discussion, which is a scholarly debate, you'll understand the language I'm using. Others are like, huh? So don't worry about it too much. It's not a massive deal. Although some would argue that it kind of is. But I approach this thinking that the law is a summary. Whenever it says that, the law, that language, is a summary of the Mosaic law.
The Mosaic 10.
Yes. Well, summarized in the 10 Commandments.
Cool. So my question then from there is, to what extent do we still interact with those? In the sense that, are they still, like, do we even consider them? Or are they just like a past, like it's good to look back on them and think about them, but does it matter anymore? Like, should we only pay attention to Jesus' commandments?
Yeah, so this is a huge theological debate and has been for years.
And I'd like you, Andy, jump in too.
What I actually think that you need to take seriously a passage like Romans 10:4. I think it's 10:4. That Christ is the end of the law. The Greek word there is telos. He is the goal. He is the end of the law. And I think what we have in Christ is a fulfillment of the law, not so that we go and keep the law in its ceremonial commands, but I think Christ has given us a law. Like Galatians 6:2 says that we should follow the law of Christ. And so
In Matthew 22, Jesus says that the entirety of the law is summed up in these two commands. The first one, love God, and the second one, love your neighbor as yourself.
right, and even in Matthew 5, Jesus will go to the extent to say that not a jot or tittle of the law, which is those are references to little marks you make on Jewish letters. Okay, so even the smallest little marks on Hebrew letters,
In iota.
yeah. So not a jot or a tittle, these little pieces, will go away from the law until it's all fulfilled. I think the point though is that Jesus did fulfill it. That's the idea. So when you read the Mosaic law, we say you're not under that law, in the sense that Jesus has delivered you from it because he has fulfilled it. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So, what do we do then with the laws like you shall not murder? Is that still in effect? Well, yeah, it is, because Jesus reasserts most of the moral law. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say all of the moral nature, the nature of the moral law in the Old Testament.
I think the only one that we would...
Sabbath would be the one that I
that's
think.
the Ten Commandments.
I wanted to go next. So with the Sabbath then, are we supposed to keep that holy? If we don't, are we now not in line with God? Are we going against him?
I don't think that we're urged to keep the Sabbath holy in the sense that the Jews in the first century understood that. I don't think that that's a requirement, mostly because what you read about Jesus and what he did on the Sabbath. I think the principle behind the Sabbath is great. Absolutely. It's a principle of rest and trust in the Lord. But if you are working on a Sunday, I don't think that you're sinning. Mm-hmm. Because Christ fulfilled the law, and in some cases his law now supersedes. So we've been freed from the Mosaic law, but we live under the law of Christ. And this is kind of in Romans 6. You kind of get this image a little bit right. You're not under the law, but under grace. But what does grace mean? Well, you're a slave now to God in Christ, right? And again, like in Galatians 6, you get the language of so fulfill the law of Christ.
Or we could say the
which
law
is
of
love your brother. Yeah.
And by the way, one of the ways that I've teased that out, or the way I understand that, is this then is a law that I'm not doing because it's going to make me righteous, but I'm doing because I have been made righteous.
Right. Which is, yeah. There's a debate. I mean, certainly the law, okay, in the Old Testament was given to a saved people. Do you understand? So they had been delivered from Egypt across the Red Sea, and then they were given the law. And so the law was a thing that expressed God's character, and you were meant to keep it because you were a saved people, because it was a mark of what they were unable to do that, and therefore they were unable to live.
And it's interesting, by the way, when you look at the Ten Commandments, that the first three, I believe it is, first 3 or 4, is all about your relationship with God. And it's significant to me that once you, the way I look at that too is once you break relationship with God, once your view of God is distorted, your view of people will be distorted, and you see that the rest of these laws will follow. You will break these laws when you break relationship with God, and it's significant that we have a correct view of God, especially if people are made in the image of God. If I'm going to have a correct view of people, and if I'm going to keep those laws.
Right. And we want to, you shall have no other gods before you is the first commandment, right? I think that that's still in effect.
Absolutely.
Because in the New Testament, what you find is lots and lots of condemnation of idolatry. So there's a reiteration of that law. I think that Jesus basically assumes most of the moral law and in his teaching, except places where he has changed it. So you get, for example, the Sabbath law, which I think that we have, or some of the food laws, which happens, you remember Pentecost, when Peter gets the vision, right? And all the sheet is there and they eat all the food. So you see them being delivered from the food laws in that regard. And so there's kind of there's a change. There's some things that were considered ritually impure are not anymore. We wouldn't call that the moral law. We call that ceremonial law. And so the way that many people will make this argument will say, look, there's a moral and a ceremonial and there's a moral aspect to the law, the ceremonial aspect to the law, and the Anyway, but they divide it into 3 parts. Like, the 3rd part is driving me crazy. I know it. It's just in my head and stuck there like many other things, Daniel.
Like that, because the iron brew, man, gets you
It's
stuck up there.
iron brew is causing me trouble.
You need to get some popcorn chicken.
Yeah.
Get those.
But
brains
don't you
little-
find that compelling?
So hold on. What I'm saying is that the argument among many Reformed folks, or when I Reformed, I mean Protestant, is that, look, the moral law is still in effect, but the ceremonial aspects of the law are fulfilled in Christ.
like, don't mix fibers.
Yeah,
Or-
stuff like that.
circumcision?
Yes.
Yeah,
So that's a ceremonial one.
Yeah.
I would say so.
Although
Because see, the
there-
distinction I make.
baptism, many would have argued, especially if you're in the Reformed tradition, you'd argue that baptism has replaced circumcision, which is the whole debate around baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if this sounds a little bit convoluted. My main point here is that I believe that Jesus has fulfilled the law. I think that's the whole point of most of the New Testament, and then he has freed us now to serve him and the law of love that he establishes. So that's my shorthand of what I believe is answering the question that you posed, Daniel.
Yeah, Andy.
I was just going to say, one of the things that people need to understand, and Jeff brought this out beautifully in his sermon this Sunday, is that it's not like God's just giving out all these laws because God is just all about rules. There was a purpose to the law. The law was, and you were talking about this even in your sermon, that we could say actually there's different aspects of the law, but the completion of the law was to bring you back into relationship with God, which wasn't happening because of the brokenness of humanity, and Jesus accomplished in our place, so that it's not like there's all these rules out there because God just wants you to follow a bunch of rules, but God wants you to flourish. God wants you to experience the fullness of life, and really these are markers of danger for you, of not experience. If you go this path, you're not going to.
Well, he's a
experience
good
the
father,
fullness of life.
right? Good fathers, good mothers. They will make rules for their children that will protect their children from danger. That will cause their kids to flourish. I say to my kids, don't run out into the street when when cars are coming. You look both ways. Those sorts of things. Those are rules. Those are laws of my home. Thou shalt not run out in the street without looking both ways. I'm not doing that because I'm a jerk to my kids and want to ruin their running fun. I'm doing that because I know the dangers that exist in the street if they don't look both ways. And so a good father will protect his kids from harm. So when God gives these laws, even though you and I look back at, for example, the Old Testament and some of the laws in Leviticus, we think, well, those are so outdated and dumb, and why would God ever give any laws like that? This is this cultural wind these days. It's because God actually has a heart for his people, and he understands the human beings, and he wants them to flourish. He knows what's going to cause them to flourish, especially in the settings that he's addressing them in at the time. So he's causing them to flourish, and so he's giving them those laws for their flourishing. This was one of my points in the sermon this weekend, was that I really do think that this is one of the real areas culturally that Christians are being heavily influenced by the wider society to look. We're almost embarrassed by the Bible and by what God has commanded us to do or believe. We're like, well, no, that stuff doesn't really lead to the good, true, beautiful life. The culture's view leads to the good, true, beautiful life, which, by the way, is patently and demonstrably, meaning that I can demonstrate, objectively that that's not true. That that's not true. That their way of thinking is leading to. So let's just take sexual ethics. Okay, people are dying in the world. They're not living long and prospering because they're following culture's sexual ethics. They're dying earlier deaths because of it. We have sexually transmitted diseases where AIDS runs rampant. There's all sorts of things that are going on that would be solved by following God's ethics when it comes to this. And so, I know the culture at large is trying to argue as hard as they can that that's not the case. No. Yeah. But I'm just telling you that the promise of freedom that the culture is giving by pushing away God's law and embracing their perceived freedom from it, that freedom is a lie, because in the end it leads to your death, which is Paul's argument in the end, that God's law leads to life. The problem is you don't keep it.
Isn't that the real issue, is that before you'll break the law, you will question the lawgiver.
Yeah.
I think the reason that we break God's law is because we have a faulty view of him as the lawgiver. I was trying to make that point this weekend. You know, if some lady is yelling at me to stay off the lawn and I don't know her, I mean, there's a real likelihood that I'm just going to jump on that lawn.
Well, and I
but
think
if
about
my
Adam
wife
and Eve.
says it, it's different, right? Because I know the character. I know the character of the one who's making the request.
And it's interesting, right? When you look at Adam and Eve, Eve particularly, how she's processing whether or not to follow God's law or not, and whether did God really say that, and then starting to twist God's words, leading to the place where Adam and Eve are now questioning the goodness of God.
Yes, and they do question the goodness of God.
So would you say then?
It's a really good point, though, Andy. I mean, that's the core of sin, right?
Yeah.
Is essentially believing that God is. All sin is theological, right? It's basically saying God is not who he actually is. God is good. The serpent comes along and says, "Are you sure he's good? Because if he was good, he wouldn't make these rules." And she buys it and says, "You're right. He wouldn't be. He's mean and he's making rules for us because he's trying to keep us from something." And so they take the apple and they eat. How did that turn out? Really well? No, in the end, it doesn't turn out well at all because God knows better. The serpent's a liar, and you and I keep buying it over and over and over and over again.
Wouldn't you say in some ways that the Bible is really a history lesson of Adam and Eve's decision to rebel against God?
Yeah, and it happens. The book of Genesis, actually, if you ever study it and just take the whole book as a whole, it's like the devolution of human beings. It starts with this sin, and then you see the ripple effects move out from there to the point, even you get in late Genesis, you get brothers killing each other just like Cain did with Abel, but you get brothers basically offing Joseph, and you get stories about, rape within families and stuff. It's just a lot, and just what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, it's just a mess. The whole thing's a mess. Yeah. Didn't turn out quite like they had planned. Yeah. And that's the point. God's law is intended for our good, and the breaking of it ruins the world. Yeah. The problem is that you and I can't fix the very world, because we might agree, we're going to go back and we're going to keep God's law, because we realize, yes, it's good. We're going to keep it. So when we go and try to keep it, what happens?
We fail.
Well, there's something inside of us that stops us from doing it. That's my point.
Exactly.
And that's what Paul's point is. It's not the law's fault. It's not God's fault. It's your fault.
Yeah.
Something inside of you stopping you. Which, by the way, just as a precursor, should give you an understanding then about what Romans 7:13-25 is. Paul's going to give you like a vivid first-person image of what that looks like, right? When sin stops you, by you, that's the question we're going to end up asking, is he referring to himself as a Christian? Is he referring to himself as someone who's not a Christian? Like, what is he referring to? And then when is he talking about this? When does this happen? In Romans 7:13-25. But the point that he's making throughout is it's the fault of sin in your members, right? Members meaning the body, the parts of your body, right? So you might want to obey God's law, but you can't do it, and you need to be freed from it. So when does that freedom happen? Is the question. Okay, and what will bring the freedom? Are Christians free from the ownership of sin that's being described in Romans 7?
Can I throw something out to you? But this is something you're going to deal with in your sermon. Feel free to take a pass on this. But how do you deal with like even the whole holiness movement and different theologies that think that a fullness of sanctification can be achieved in this life? Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that those holiness movements oftentimes have a special view of Romans 7, and what they'll say is Romans 7 is the sub-Christian. It's a description of a Christian. Okay, so when Paul writes, I can't do what I want to do, and I don't do. These are the verses we're talking about. Mm-hmm. A holiness movement will say that this is a description of the Christian who is not living the fullest life, meaning that they're carnal. So like separate people into carnal and spiritual. And what they'll say is the Romans 7 experience that's being described here is the carnal Christian. Romans 8, which talks about life in the spirit, that's the spiritual Christian. And so you need to move in your Christian life from carnal to spiritual. So they're arguing there's two different kinds of Christians. There's like a low level one and a high level one. And once you reach the highest level, John Wesley and many of his followers argued in a kind of a Christian perfection. And what he meant by that is like a perfection of love. I could love perfectly. I had friends, in fact, I don't know if you guys ever had friends who say I haven't sinned for like months or weeks. I had one guy tell me one time, a dear friend of mine said, Jeff, I haven't sinned for weeks. I said, until now.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because that's a lie. But that's the viewpoint that many hold on that passage and what has been taught in lots and lots of churches. That's what I wrote my master's thesis about, was actually the streams of thought that were teaching that particular doctrine. And so you're asking me what I thought about it. I think that's wrong. But I also think that it's wrong for us to understand the other kind of typically Reformed view, which is, Romans 7 is a description of a Christian, but it's normal. This is what a normal Christian experiences, this failure and this, I don't do what I want to do. I try to do, but I don't. No, woe is me. I'm only going to ever be delivered when Jesus returns, which all of that might be true, but I don't think that's what Romans 7 is talking about. So to give away my viewpoint, even before I get there, for those of you who are listening,
even before IJM weekend.
Yeah. So to give away the viewpoint, the one that I'm going to argue for in a couple weeks.
Jeff can't help himself.
I'm arguing that Paul's talking about himself as what we call a representative Jew. I think that he's basically saying this is what happens. This is what it looks like when the law comes upon a Jewish person like me meaning Paul, and the internal frustration that takes place. It's an extended illustration, basically trying to say, look, I love God's law with all my mind, meaning that I'm a Jewish person, and you can read Psalm 119 to see how much we love it, we Jews. But every time I try to keep it, there's something in me that just stops it. So even though I want to do it, I can't do it. I can't do it. Oh, woe is me. Who will rescue me from the body of this? So who's going to rescue you? Well, Jesus is. And he did. And that's why in Romans 8:1 you get language like there is now no condemnation. Well, what does now mean? Well, now as a believer, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So properly said, I think that Romans 7, the end of Romans 7, is about an unbeliever, specifically a Jewish unbeliever and the experience that a Jewish unbeliever has under the law. And that's basically what Romans 7:13, the question, that's what it's raising. So it's trying to answer that question.
Which would make sense of why Paul was adamantly opposed to the Judaizers.
Yes, absolutely. So I will say this, there are some contextual clues to my viewpoint that are so clear that it is once you see them, it is hard to unsee them. Like the reason I love doing it as a master's thesis and I love showing it to people is because when they see it, they're like, oh, I see what he's doing there. It's good stuff, man.
And I see what you're doing.
You're not going to give
that hook and
no,
kind of throwing it
I'm
out.
not going to give you those.
That now, are you?
So I gave you the answer. You have to come to find out why I hold the answer.
It's like at the end of the heist movie where you see it all play out.
It'll be interesting. It's a different kind of sermon for me, right? Because I've taught it in classes and stuff before. So I'm going to try to do Bible study with us. I'm going to show you. I'm going to give probably 3 or 4 reasons why it is that I think this is the right answer. I'll give you the options, and I'm going to give you the 3 or 4 reasons why it is that I believe the option that I have, and then I'll give you the implications for what those options, what that means.
Can you, for this sermon, introduce yourself as Doctor?
Oh, dude, you
Jeff
better
Bucknam,
believe I am. Because
if you walk out, Jeff, if you walked out with a monocle, I think
like Colonel Clink.
Yeah. If you wore a monocle and you had maybe you went full suit,
man,
like a professor, in a bow tie, an Al Mohler bow tie.
You know what? I might actually don the suit for this just so that I can try to win the day.
Seems fitting.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, I love it.
Or not.
I love it.
I don't know if I own a suit. I don't think I own a suit.
Andy has a suit. He looks great. You should get a suit.
I think I do. I have one that I do weddings in.
Very nice.
Yeah. Ezra's got some suits.
Dude.
He's got 3 or 4 of them.
Brother.
Kenyans love themselves some
He
suits.
looks so good in those suits.
What are those guys called in Africa who
Dandies.
Dandies. Go look up on YouTube dandies.
Oh, it's a dandy.
Dude, it's amazing. These guys live in
Congo
these slums.
dandies.
They live in the slums and they spend all their money on buying the most flamboyant, bright, like incredible
well-dressed
suits.
suits.
They look amazing and they walk through these slums and everyone just claps for them.
Oh, I like it.
It's amazing.
Hey, can I make a request now that I think we're reaching the pinnacle of our
The apex of this program.
In 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, I can't remember how many weeks' time, I am supposed to be in the great province of Quebec.
Nice.
And I'm going to be in Quebec City. And then Ezra and I are going to be in Montreal for a couple days.
What are you doing
So,
there?
What's the name of the hotel again? It was that French name?
I don't know. So I'm asking, what is it that I have to do in Quebec City or Montreal? What do I have to eat?
That's a no-brainer.
What do I have to visit and see that if I come back and haven't done, people would just shake their heads and say, shame on you. So I need to know some recommendations from the 6 listeners that we have.
16.
The 16 listeners that we have about what is great in Quebec, other than the people, the fine people of Quebec. What is great there? And somebody's going to say Montreal smoked meat. I don't mean just the smoked meat or the putain. I want a place where I'm supposed to buy this putain.
Near the hotel?
Near the Frontenac.
Wow.
You've ruined Quebec for me. Just ruined
I have
it.
French ancestry, so I'm very excited about it.
Wow. This will be great. I can't wait for you to come back.
Neither of you have any advice on this?
I was going to say poutine, but you stole it, and then you said it the way you say it.
Andy, is that the only French
killing
name?
me
That's the
over
only
here.
French word you probably know. So
I've eaten Duns, by the way. I've had Duns.
I'll have you know that I know how to
poutine.
say French fries, Daniel.
French fries.
Yeah, isn't
That's
that
funny.
French?
In the office
Pomme
today,
frite.
we were trying to between about 4 of us, we were trying to count to 3 in French, and I said instead of trois, I said treize.
I think that's another language.
If I could just throw one last thing in here, Jeff, you'll appreciate this. One of my favorite American movements that never caught on was Liberty Fries.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Let's just bring
Freedom
that.
Fries.
Freedom. That's the Freedom Fries.
Did you know that after the fall, after the World Trade Center and the fell, and I think France condemned the U.S. doing something somewhere, and so they, instead of all the restaurants changed the name of
From French fries.
from French fries to Freedom Fries.
In France they did?
No,
or in America?
in the
US.
Oh man, do you imagine if
We're
they did?
not calling them French
instead of
fries.
Freedom fries and then freedom rings. Like for onion rings.
Oh, it's the best.
Freedom reigns, baby.
Oh, we have got
love
to open our
America.
own restaurant.
Oh, we could open it in Montreal, and we could sell stuff, and all the proceeds could go towards the podcast and getting us up the rankings.
All right, good times.
Well, thank you for listening to this podcast, and make sure you send some emails our way where we have to go.
We're striving for 125.
Yeah, we're trying to get the top 125 and boost our listenership from 16 to 32 overnight. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.